headquarters of common sense.
Talk Radio.
Time to say a very warm welcome for the very first time live in the studio. Of course, it is our man from Wales. Sir, you call yourself Sir Richard Taylor, don't
there's
you?
the reason for that. Look, if Tony Blair can be knighted, right, then
Yes.
I can be knighted.
Why
And,
not?
He's a war criminal. I mean, it's as simple as that, in my opinion, of course.
Of course, and you're entirely entitled to the opinion.
I'm known for expressing my opinions, Mike. As you know, I like to rant about a lot of things.
Yes.
And of course, you mentioned a lot in your opening remarks there. We're talking about Boris and the U-turn on mandatory vaccinations.
Yeah, where do you want to start?
I mean, let's start with that. I think it's a huge story, certainly for those of us who've been campaigning for this, and the NHS 100,000, the Together Declaration. There've been so many campaigns and groups, and many journalists and commentators out there that have said, look, this is completely bang out of order and wrong.
Right.
You cannot force or mandate a vaccine upon NHS workers. The NHS is already in massive crisis as it is. We all know that.
Yes.
And of course, I think this has a lot to do with the political movements of Boris Johnson as well, given the fact that his backbenchers were really not happy with the way he was handling things.
And they're taking credit, aren't they, for stopping the Christmas lockdown from actually going ahead and the New Year lockdown from going ahead. So they're feeling quite sort of chipper, aren't they, at the moment?
Yeah, of course, yeah. And it's a big boys club. And, Boris is the bad boy of politics, and let's be honest. And, he was the right man for the job when it came to Brexit, getting Brexit done over the line. Absolutely. But since then, he's pushing this whole idea now that, we're going to get Brexit freedoms. Well, where's he been for the last 2 years then?
Yeah.
What's been happening?
Right.
All this promise that there'll be no, we have the ability to take the VAT, the tax off, energy
bills,
prices,
yes.
and stuff like that. And why hasn't he done it yet?
Right.
But he's putting taxes up. This is a Conservative government. There's supposed to be low tax.
And do you know what's interesting as well is that you and I and many others among us, Julia Hartley-Brewer, of course, lots of people at Talk Radio have been calling for much of what is now being promised by Boris Johnson. But why has he had to wait until it all goes horribly wrong before he actually starts to say he's going to deliver it? Same with Robert Halfon. Robert Halfon MP was on with Julia this morning saying, let's get rid of the 20% subsidy for green energy. Well, I've been calling for that for about a year. What are they catching up finally with popular opinion?
Well, it is, isn't it? It's all about political timing, isn't it? And politicians use that very well to their advantage, don't they? To cover some of the other stories that we've already mentioned this morning,
yes.
The partygate stuff, which, by the way, to your viewers and listeners, Mike, that's not going to go away, It's going to come back to bite him, let's be honest. And it ain't so much the fact
Well,
that
it hasn't gone away.
No, it's not that he had a party. It's the fact that the rest of us were told to stay at home, couldn't visit our dying relatives, and the effect is, it's not what political journalists or commentators think or news stations, it's what the public think.
Yes.
And the public mood, I can tell you, because I've been on a lot of pub tours in Wales, the public mood is people do not trust Boris Johnson.
That is the problem. And what I always say to people is that if you say that you don't think there's anybody better and you cannot imagine replacing him with someone else inside the Tory party, well, wait till the next time he does something that you weren't expecting him to do, or doesn't keep his promise, or doesn't do what he said he was going to do because he got away with it this time. Because that is his MO at the end of the day. And it's nothing to do with me hating Boris Johnson. Some people think I hate him. I don't hate anybody. I just want what's best for this country. And what is best for this country right now is not a tax rise, is not allowing a continued flow of illegal migrants to land on our beaches, as they're no doubt doing this morning on a beautiful sunny blue day in the sky, not forcing people out of their cars to walk and cycle everywhere, not making people get green energy heat pumps that don't work in a back garden, and sorting out Brexit for people in Northern Ireland and for people who are still suffering poverty in this country because of inflation. That's what he needs to do.
Just encapsulated there, Mike, in a paragraph, right, so succinctly that's exactly how people feel.
Yeah.
The Brexit dividend they talked about, well, we've been banging on about this for the last 20 months, 2 years since we apparently left the EU. But we're still tied in with the Northern Ireland Protocol. We still got problem with our fishing waters. We still got problems with the fact we've not used the levers available to us to cut some of the cost of living.
Yeah.
We've got inflation going through the roof. We've got high bills coming for a lot of people, gas and electric, which is going to push people into so much poverty.
Yeah.
A lot of us some people can afford it, but most people in the country can't.
Yes.
They're low income, low wage people across Wales, and I know in England, Scotland and everything else, people can't afford this.
But also there's a lot of people, Richard, in my mind, who are now getting squeezed, that there's always going to be poor people in the country who suffer, and that's what the welfare system is for, to help them through that and to provide them with some kind of safety net so that they don't have starving children, they don't have to go to food banks. I mean, I'm very sceptical about all of that anyway, as you probably know.
Yeah.
But now there's people in the middle who are hard-working families who actually don't make bad money, and maybe make the average wage, but they're getting squeezed because you cannot possibly tell me that you can quadruple somebody's energy bill and expect it not to have an impact on everything else.
Yeah, well, what I don't understand is this, that we got gas under our feet, but because of the green eco-warriors, we don't want to do anything about it because we're afraid of the environment. I mean, I just think it's crazy.
Well, somebody told me the other day that wasn't true, that in fact it's actually not cost-effective to get loads of gas from underneath the ground in this country. I've yet to hear that proper debate being had. We should have it here.
We should,
but let's talk about it.
Well,
let's
if you could, listen, I'd get the shovels out of my back garden in Wales and I'd be digging for it.
Yeah,
you know,
well, I mean,
because
it'd be
it's
like
a lot cheaper than I'm
California,
paying
where,
now.
you know, you drive around California and you come around a corner and you suddenly see one of these oil derricks in somebody's backyard and they're literally drilling for their own oil.
Yeah.
I mean, let's do that. I don't mind, you know, but there's got to be a better way, though, isn't there?
Boris is off to Ukraine or Russia to speak to Putin, and you know, when you think about the fact that they're supplying some of our gas as well, apparently. So, you know, I mean, he's got negotiating levers there, Putin, isn't he? Because if he cuts off the gas, we're screwed, aren't we?
Well, I mean, presumably Putin will, if he's got a sense of humour, will be there with some wine and cheese and go, you know, you fancy a bit of in Russia we do it with champagne and caviar.
In the back garden of the Kremlin.
Yeah,
you know,
exactly right.
Yeah.
I mean, the point is that he needs to get back his mojo, which he's definitely lost. It may well be that he can get it back, but I'm just very, very wary of those people who are slavishly supporting. Rishi Sunak at the weekend as well seems to be kind of distancing himself. What the hell's he doing recommending a tax rise?
Well, I think this whole idea of levelling up, but they're giving with one hand and they're taking with the other, Mike, and that's what you see. You know, the national insurance hike has come in, the cost of living, all the things that you talk about, constantly banging about, because it is the home of common sense, where you tell people exactly how it is, and that's what people need to hear, need to know. And I think Boris's premiership, I don't think, this is my personal opinion, and I was a great supporter of Boris Johnson to get Brexit done. Yes. Absolutely, I supported it, believed in it. We're on the anniversary of it tonight, as you know. We're celebrating it again. I always celebrate Brexit.
You know, I was going to ask you about that, but I'll let you finish your point.
Yeah, and I think Boris is, you know, his time is he's on a watch, and I think that the rebellion we've seen already over vaccine passports we saw happening in the House of Commons, we've seen so many different, you know, our own Patterson scandal, all these things combined, Mike, paint a picture of a man who's great. He's bombastic, he's a bad boy of politics, people like him, he's got flair, charisma, but actually, can he govern? And that's the bigger question.
And that is the question that people are forgetting, because the people who are there's two strands of people, it seems to me, in the media right now. There's the people who will always have a go at Boris Johnson, you know, the people who work at Sky, the BBC, you know, the Ramona side of things, who are never going to be happy and are always going to undermine him. I mean, I heard this morning on another show somebody talking about, of course, you know, he's so scattergun in his approach that they won't even give him any sort of secret papers or classified documents to carry outside Downing Street, because they think he'll just leave them somewhere. Now, that to me is a sort of stupid...
That's a Biden syndrome, isn't it?
Well, yeah, but it's a kind of a stupid criticism of a Prime Minister. But what the question really should be is, right, forget about the fact that you want to defend him because parties aren't important and cake doesn't matter. The point is, what's he actually doing? And is he a Conservative Prime Minister? And I've been making this point now for months, actually, since about November, when I said I think he's a busted flush. He's not doing it. He's not a Conservative Prime Minister. He's not doing what he was elected to do.
I think a big shock to a lot of Conservative voters as well and supporters was this big green agenda thing that he pushed. He seems to be addicted to this, and the cost that's going to have on people, as we mentioned, those middle earners with inflation and the hikes in taxes, but more importantly, you know, to convert over to this green agenda, it's going to cost people. You know, you mentioned the boilers a couple of weeks ago, £5,000-10,000 to get one of these boilers that don't really work, you know, and the reality is, this is not a Conservative government that I recognise. You know, nowhere near. They've moved away. They've moved the goalposts off the pitch. Yeah. And I think people are realising that and asking themselves, but the problem is, Mike, there's no alternative. No. What do we do? You know, we got Keir Starmer.
And also, I mean, I'm the very last person who would ever want to see a Labour government in power. You know, certainly not under Keir Starmer, who's possibly the worst and most boring man that ever walked the earth. You know, we don't want that, and that's not what I'm calling for. But Camilla Long in the Sunday Times this weekend got it right, where somebody in what I would call a proper newspaper actually wrote a column in which they put it all at Carrie's feet, because she said quite rightly, the green agenda, you know, the whole business of flying back the animals from Afghanistan, the whole business of partygate, wallpaper, all of the stuff that he's been in trouble for is all down to her. Absolutely everything.
I mean, yeah, she's definitely wearing the trousers in the relationship. You can see that, and her effect is coming through in Boris, because until he was Prime Minister, of course, we knew a lot about his private personal life, which is none of our business. You know, I don't like to talk about people's private lives because I got my own, you know.
Well, exactly. You know? I don't really care what he does.
I don't care what he does privately, but when it affects the public, when it affects policy and legislation, and it's coming from someone who's not elected, i.e. his wife, Carrie, I think that's completely wrong, you know, and I'm not sure why the Cabinet, though, don't hold him to account on these things.
Well, imagine if Theresa May's husband was doing all of that. Imagine if Theresa May's husband, because of his activities in the city, was getting her to give tax breaks or something to, you know, big law firms or big, you know, merchant banks, and then also getting her to introduce, you know, foreign businesses into Britain because that was good for him, you know, or whatever, you know, his pet project was. People would be up in arms going, what's it got to do with him? We didn't elect him, we elected Theresa May.
Yeah, well, it's always the case with politicians. I've got to the point where, listen, I've only been involved in politics the last couple of years, Mike, and I got involved because I'm a working class lad from the streets of Llanelli, which is in Wales, right? And I just saw what was happening.
Believe it or not, I've been to Llanelli
Have you
Rugby
been to
Club.
Llanelli?
I have. Well, because I used to know Rupert Moon quite well.
Oh, right, okay.
You might not remember. In one of my...
he had the same shaped nose as me. I do remember Rupert. And Johnson Davis look-alike.
It must be. Absolutely right. Yeah, well, in one of my earlier incarnations, I was the editor of the Daily Mirror in Wales. So, we were all over that like a rash.
Well, you didn't do much to get rid of Mark Drakeford, then, did you, writing your article?
He didn't exist before I did, but I did my best to get rid of the Western Mail. I think that's just as useless as they always were.
Yeah, they are. I've got a word for them, but I shan't use it on radio. It's before 9 o'clock in the evening. But yeah, look, I came from the streets and I looked at what politicians were doing, and I was affecting normal, hard-working, working-class people, and that's how I got involved in politics. And I've seen politicians lie. They lied on Brexit, and all the stuff that I'm seeing now, I still feel the same. And, I think people out there need to find a new revolution, a new political party, a movement or something.
Well, this was going to be my question to you. As you stood, I don't know if you were where you were on the night of Brexit, whether you were in Westminster at Parliament Square, where Julie Hartley-Brewer was wearing a Union Jack dress and wowing the crowds, and it was quite a night. It was absolutely staggering. I actually wasn't feeling very well, fun enough. I had my one and only day off the day before because I was unwell, but I had to go to it, and I had to go to the party afterwards. And there was a sense in the country of a kind of new beginning. There was a sense of a new era. Yeah. And of course, nobody could have predicted COVID and all of that. But I mean, what were you, when you were standing wherever you were standing with your drink in your hand that night, what were you expecting Britain to become?
I can remember it now. I was standing in a hotel in Cardiff because I decided to get the Brexiteers in Wales together. Right. Instead of going to London, which we all, everyone tends to do, I thought, let's do it in Wales because I'm a patriotic Welshman.
I love Cardiff
and Wales voted to leave. Let's remember that. Although the Welsh government, Welsh Labour, of course, are still opposed to Brexit, hate Brexit, and would reverse it if they had a chance. Right. And Plaid Cymru, a Welsh party, would take us back into the EU. That's what they want. But Wales voted to leave. And so for me, it was a celebration of the fact that we've taken back control of our money, our laws and our borders, all the things that made us a sovereign, independent nation. That's what I voted for. That's what I believed in. I believe in our country. I believe in the United Kingdom. In 2019, I believed in Boris Johnson. Yeah. I believe in what he set out to do.
And this is a message I give to people who say, why are you bashing him? I haven't changed. He has, okay? So get that right. Do not make the mistake that I've somehow gone soft on the whole idea of conservatism and of Brexit and all of that. I think there is a rump of people who are worried that if Boris Johnson goes, all the Ramonas will come back into power and suddenly we'll be back in the EU. That's not happening, by the way.
It was a sad state of affairs, don't it? Right, where you're scared to replace a prime minister you're not happy with because there's no one better than
That's
him.
the excuse they use for not getting rid of Cressida Dick.
Yeah,
and look what happened there.
Well, she should have gone a long time ago. Yeah. We won't even talk about that later, no doubt. But yeah, look, we've seen that with the Met Police. We mentioned it at the start of the show this morning when the Sue Gray report has been redacted. The Met Police don't want to release some of it. I think the Met Police are culpable for some of the things that happened because they would have been involved in the security during the partygate. So maybe she doesn't want to publish things that will incriminate her.
I mean, the whole thing is a mess of their own making, and that's what I find the most objectionable, that they think that we are now responsible somehow for getting them out of their own mess instead of kicking them and saying, no, actually, just get out. And we'll bring somebody else in to fix the mess. You can't fix your own mess. Sometimes somebody has to do it for you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, look, it's going to get to the point where I think there's going to be more stories as well, Mike. Cummins is on this mission as well, isn't he? Yeah. You can see that he's
there will be.
He's on a mission to get him out,
and people are tired of all of that, I think. There is a sort of certain fatigue that sets in. And Boris is hoping that actually, in the end, saves his backside because he'll think that everybody forgets about it after a while.
Yeah. Well, one good thing, the NHS mandatory vaccinations, that's being dropped, right, apparently today. That's going, which is great news, right? I think with the green agenda, if Boris does a U-turn on that and he starts, cutting taxes where he's able to use some of the Brexit dividend that's available to him, I think he can turn heads. And who knows, he could be the next Prime Minister at the next general election. But at the moment, it's just my opinion, I don't think he will be. And I don't think that members in his own party are happy with him. He's a liability in many cases. You mentioned with the way that he behaves, the way that he performs, I think he's outstayed his position. That's my opinion. I really do, and I don't think he'll be the next Prime Minister at the next general election.
Fascinating stuff. We're here with Richard Taylor, of course. We've got lots more to do, and we've got calls to take as well. Keep them coming because we want to hear from you. Because I want to talk about the highway code coming up because some interesting stuff happened over the weekend. Some people saw some terrible things. Many of you will be telling me exactly what you saw. Cyclists in the middle of the road, rows going on, all the things that we predicted would happen did happen. 0344 499 1000 is the number. This is Talk Radio.
Bold Talk. Talk Radio.
Listen on your smart speaker.
Watch it live on your smart TV.
The world headquarters of common sense.
Talk Radio. Offence archaeology on Twitter. Quite terrifying.
Don't beg Jeff Bezos. Charge him, for God's sake.
Have a day off. Use some common sense.
People can say whatever they want.
Talk Radio.
It's not all bad news. Beware of sharp comments. I listen to Talk Radio.
A national treasure.
Plain talking radio, 23 and a half hours a day. Talk Radio.
The home of common sense.
Welcome back to the Independent Republican Mike Graham, right here on the home Common Sense, the place where you will find the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. I'm delighted to say we've got Richard Taylor here with us this morning from Wales, a passionate Welshman, a man who believes very much in the United Kingdom, a man who believes in doing the right thing for the people of this country. And when I say this country, I don't mean Wales or Scotland or Northern Ireland or England. I mean Great Britain, the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland. Richard, I think you and I will agree on that. Let's talk about Mark Drakeford for a bit, because there's a lot of things that you do in Wales that we don't do. I've got a question here actually from Steve, who says, how does your Welsh guest justify free Welsh prescriptions in crossing to England for treatment because their hospital system is no good? Well, the NHS under Drakeford is terrible, isn't it?
Absolutely dreadful. I mean, let's remind ourselves, Mike, you know, before the pandemic came, 5 out of 7 of our health boards were in special measures.
Right.
You know, there was a huge problem with ambulance waiting times, far worse than England. And yet all Mark Drakeford ever seems to do is complain he doesn't get enough money from Westminster.
Right.
But yet they have enough money to run the NHS. It's just run poorly.
Right.
You know, when you got middle management...
Well, they're not the only ones doing that. I mean, they're doing that in England.
We've got it in England as well. But our waiting times were worse than England. You know, we've seen it through the pandemic as well. 1 in 4 people who died of COVID or with COVID caught it in hospital in Wales. I mean, that's a staggering record. And we've got the highest number of deaths in the whole of the UK per capita when it comes to COVID.
Right.
That's the statistics that are out there, not mine. And I think the NHS has been handled so badly under devolution. It's been a disaster. While I don't have great confidence in the way the NHS has been run here in England, it's far worse state in Wales currently as it is. And I think Drakeford's been responsible for that. Vaughan Gethin was then the health minister, who failed miserably. So what do? They give him a new job. They made him the economy minister. I mean, you can't write it.
You literally couldn't make it up, could you? Do you know anything about the economy? No. Great. Well, then you could be in charge of it.
And this is a government who's stated on record, we don't know what we're doing on the economy. Lee Waters, one of the members of the parliament there. We don't know what we're doing on the economy. They just make it up.
Well, the great thing was
along.
The woman who was given then the health brief, one of the funniest interviews I think I've ever heard was her trying to justify what a nightclub was.
Yeah, it was Elaine Morgan, that was. A good Welsh name, Elaine Morgan.
There you go.
Yeah, some of the policies, look through the lockdown as well. Absolutely absurd what Drakeford did. Taping up aisles, buying non-essential, essential things. Yeah, I mean, it's just crazy. And looking back as well, and I want to remind our listeners and viewers as well, there were members of the Welsh Parliament, we talked about Boris breaking partygate and rules, they did it down in Wales as well, but because the Welsh media, sadly...
It wasn't Drakeford at some Diwali party
Well, I posted that video, went viral, 1.4 million views. It's the biggest video I've ever put out there.
Well played, mate.
Yeah, and he was dancing in a Diwali party while telling people to wear masks indoors. I mean, it's just the hypocrisy. Yeah. And then the health minister was caught. Remember when in Wales they said you can't sit on a park bench and have a picnic?
Right.
Well, he stopped to have fish and chips with his wife and his kid, right? And someone photographed it. And then he said, no, we didn't stop for a picnic, we just stopped for a break. I mean, then we had the three politicians down there who, when they told the pubs to shut, not to sell alcohol, they had a booze up down at the Parliament as well.
Amazing.
I mean, and they got away with it.
I know. This is the hypocrisy that people are sick to death of. And so, for those people who are still struggling, and, maybe by the end of this week you might get it, there is a problem with the political system in Britain. It's not just in Wales and Scotland and England and Northern Ireland. It's everywhere. I mean, you look at Northern Ireland, where they quite often struggle to even form a government because they can't work out what to do. Scotland, there are people now revolting against Nicola Sturgeon. Every football match now, they're chanting, things that we can't say here about Nicola Sturgeon. In England, we've got a situation where we're kind of in stalemate. We're sort of treading water. Nothing's going on because it's all hands to the pump inside of Downing Street to save Boris Johnson. Yeah, and that's no way to run a country.
That's the big focus now, and I think we obviously, in Wales, going back to Wales, if I can bring it back, Mike, use my opportunity as much as I can on Talk Radio, the home of common sense.
Too.
Wales now is facing a situation where the Welsh Government will not be having an independent public inquiry into the handling of COVID.
Right.
So they're doing a UK-wide one. And there are so many groups, the bereaved families in Wales, for example, are calling for Drakeford. The Welsh Conservatives, thankfully, are in some kind of opposition, because they've been not very good, in my opinion, being in opposition to the Welsh Government, are calling for this independent report, because things happened during the pandemic. People died as a result of restrictions and lockdowns.
Absolutely.
The mental health
and those figures
will
turn out to be far bigger, I believe, than the ones from COVID themselves.
Absolutely. And I think when that public inquiry is done, but again, are we going to get to the truth, Mike? We've seen it now with Boris Johnson and this report for Sue Gray. Will we truly see an independent report into how things were handled and what was done?
Yeah, absolutely extraordinary stuff. Now, let me finish up just with a little item which is close to my heart, because the new highway code kicked in. To be honest, I don't even know if you've got your own highway code in Wales. I'm not sure.
It's a UK-wide one, isn't it?
I think so.
That's not devolved.
Is it not devolved? So the highway code...
I'll have to check and get back to it, but I don't think it is.
Given the DVLA's in Swansea, where nobody actually bothers going to work anymore, I assume it's a UK-wide sort of thing, because it's all Department of Transport and all that. But, I saw pictures over the weekend. There was a guy in Dorset who we're trying to find and get on, actually, who was a businessman, who said there were 8 cyclists out for a ride somewhere down near Weymouth, and they deliberately didn't allow any cars to pass. They were turning around, laughing at the drivers, basically sticking 2 fingers up to them, because that's what now the new highway code says. Everyone's got the right of way unless you happen to be in a car or any other kind of motor vehicle. And so I want people actually to call me up today and tell me what you saw and what you did. But what's your experience?
I arrived down yesterday, Mike, and I'm amazed at Cairns, London. It's like a cycle track.
It is.
I know it's everywhere. I'm not saying people shouldn't cycle, but they're crazy.
You're welcome to the velodrome.
I mean, they're more dangerous than the motorists. They're just nuts. They have no sense of direction, what they're doing.
And they're coming at you from every angle.
Absolutely. It's like a war zone out there, We don't have the same congestion in Wales, obviously, so it's not as bad. Although Mark Drakeford has this big green agenda and wants everyone on bikes and scooters.
Although, to be honest, I remember sitting in that traffic coming in from the M4, as you come into Cardiff past the castle. What a nightmare that was. I bet that's not any better.
Well, they wanted to build an M4 relief road, didn't they? But they turned it down, which would have made huge sense, because businesses now, it's a bottleneck into Wales, and it cuts off businesses from coming in.
Right.
It was a massive spend. They spent millions of pounds on this kind of, let's find out if it's worth doing, and they turned turned it down because they thought it will affect the environment. But the problem is the traffic is sat there, parked up with fumes pumping
that's
out.
It. I mean, all of this is about the green
opposite.
agenda. In Wales's green agenda is even worse than ours, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, they're hooked on this climate change. In fact, their budget for 2022 is one of the highest spends that they have in Wales is on their green agenda. And when you consider we have the highest levels of poverty in Wales, 200,000 children living below the poverty line in Wales. There's a housing crisis. You know, I mentioned the health, our education. We're bottom of the PISA table, which is the measurement for math, science and English. Yeah. It's just dreadful. And lots of people, young people, if they want to get good jobs in the future, they're leaving Wales, Mike. And I want that to stop. I want to fight against that. You know, we need something in Wales. We need a new revolution, a new political party, if you want, to do something to change and to turn the tide in Wales.
Yeah, brilliant. I think Sir Richard Taylor's a pretty good title for you. Listen, brilliant to have you on. Thank you so much for coming in. Richard Taylor, what a guy.
Good talk.
Hot talk. Bold talk. Talk radio.
Listen on your smart speaker.
Watch it live on your smart TV.
The world headquarters of common sense.
Talk Radio.